The anime begins in a mountain village that has been suffering from constant attacks by an S-rank Fenrir. Consequently, the villagers spent all of their savings to hire an SS-rank party to defeat the beast. The members of the Blazing Dragon Fang are among the strongest adventurers in the world, each possessing their own unique abilities. However, there is Kurt, and the only thing he is proficient at is completing chores. For this reason, he is hiding behind a wall to avoid being injured. Nevertheless, Kurt is the first person the Fenrir attacks as soon as it arrives, so he is thrown aside while the other members of the group prepare for combat. 𝐂𝐨𝐵 orders Bandana to restrain the Fenrir, so she pulls her wire and binds it. But in the blink of an eye, the Fenrir breaks her back against a wall. Normally, Bandana would be confined to a wheelchair for the rest of her life. Yet, with Maris on the team, she's healed in seconds and returns to the task. She uses a tree to anchor herself to the ground, providing 𝐂𝐿𝐵 with an opening to aim at the head of the Fenrir, and then he leaps and sets it on fire with his magic sword. The villagers are so happy with the defeat of the Fenrir that they prepare a banquet for the group, even though the village is almost completely out of money. However, 𝐂𝐿𝐵 utterly loathes this peasant food, so he orders Kurt to prepare a decent meal for him instead. Bandana asks him to make something special because today is the last day they will be able to eat the food prepared by Kurt. Kurt does not understand what they mean by that, so he asks 𝐂𝐿𝐵 for an explanation, and he tells Kurt that as of today he is being fired. Kurt does not understand why they are firing him, so he asks 𝐂𝐿𝐵 if he did something wrong. But 𝐂𝐿𝐵 says the problem is that Kurt is not doing enough. Certainly he takes care of the group's chores for them, but other than that, he is completely useless in combat, and parties can only have 4 members. Therefore, if they want the group to truly become stronger, they need to replace Kurt with a powerful mage, or at least someone who can hold their own in a fight. Kurt begs them to let him stay in the group, but 𝐂𝐿𝐵 kicks him in the stomach because he is tired of hearing Kurt's complaints. They do not need him anymore, and that is final. The following day, Kurt leaves the village alone with nowhere to go, and without a single coin in his pocket. Kurt eventually reaches the city of 𝐂𝐨 and is down to his last coins, so he truly needs to find a new job soon. He finds a temporary employment agency and decides to enter. When he enters, he is greeted by the receptionist. She asks if he is there to hire someone or to look for a job. And after Kurt tells her that he is looking for work, she informs him that he will need to undergo an interview and an aptitude test. First, she asks for basic details, such as name, age, and hometown. So he tells her that his name is Kurt Hawkins. He is 15 years old and is from Heist Village in the Shin Mountain. Kityu had no idea there was a village in those mountains, but moving forward, she asks what his work history was like. Kurt tells her that he was part of the Blazing Dragon Fang, but all he did for them were basic chores, and he was recently fired. Kityu is surprised to learn that Kurt was part of an S-rank group, and even though he did not do much for them, having the name of the group on his application will definitely help in finding a new job. Kurt is happy to hear this, and now all he needs to do is complete the aptitude test, so that Kityu can discover what his strengths and weaknesses are. Well, aptitudes in this world are gifts granted by God, and if Kurt is lucky, he might discover a hidden talent today. Aptitudes are ranked from G rank to SSS rank, and the difference between the aptitude ranks is so great that someone with a G rank sword skill could barely swing a sword, while someone with an A rank sword skill could split a rock in half without effort. Kurt is excited to find out if he has any talent. But unfortunately, all the combat aptitudes on his sheet are ranked as G rank, so he has no hope of taking on a combat role. Kurt loses all hope immediately, but Kityu tells him there is still a chance he has a good labor skill such as alchemy or blacksmithing. However, the technician who handles those aptitude tests is currently on vacation, and Kurt will have to return next week to be evaluated. Kurt tells her that he will not last that long because he has no money in his pocket, so he really needs to find a job today. Q understands Kurt's situation, so she asks him to try lifting one of those sandbags over there. Kurt tries, and when he places his hands on the bag, he feels a strange sensation, almost as if the sand were draining a bit of his mana. Regardless, he manages to lift the bag, and since he is strong enough to do so, Kityu believes he should be capable of handling construction work. She informs him that Margrav of Tianus is currently recruiting workers to assist in repairing the city walls, so Kurt should be able to secure employment if she writes a letter of recommendation for him. Kurt is grateful for her assistance and immediately goes to meet Margaravi. When he arrives, Margot reads the letter stating that Kurt wishes to work there, but he honestly does not think Kurt appears capable of handling construction labor. On the other hand, he needs all the help he can get, so he decides to give Kurt a chance. He instructs him to mix some cement and use it to repair the wall, and his payment will be determined by the amount of work he completes. Margot says he will return later to check on Kurt's progress, and warns him that he had better start right away. If he has not used at least half a barrel of cement by the time he returns, the payment will be very low. Kurt wants to ask a question because Margot never mentioned anything about pouring mana into the cement to strengthen it, but he decides to remain silent, assuming it is likely common knowledge. Nevertheless, he is surprised that the goal is only half a barrel of cement, as that seems far too easy. Therefore, Kurt decides to use as much cement as he can before Marga returns. When Marga does return, he is shocked to see that Kurt has already finished an entire section of the wall. Kurt apologizes, explaining that he could have done more but ran out of cement in the middle of the task. Marga still finds it difficult to believe. Kurt has actually repaired more than a third of the massive west wall, so he asks Kurt how he managed to repair the top of the wall. Kurt explains that he simply threw the cement up there and used his stick to smooth it out. Normally, Marga would call Kurt a liar because that seems impossible, but Kurt clearly managed to make it work. Therefore, he must be telling the truth. He asks Kurt how long he intends to work there, and Kurt says he only needs the job for a week, which Marga is happy to hear. He tells Kurt that he has worked enough for today and can go home. He does not have enough money on hand to pay Kurt for all the work he has done, so he hands him a small pouch of money and promises to send the remainder through the temporary employment agency. Kurt is impressed because even the small pouch contains more money than he could ever earn while working for the hero's party. Over the following days, Kurt continues to work hard on the wall repairs, but suddenly Marga tells him that he is being fired. Kurt asks for the reason, and Marga explains that the wall repairs were intended to provide work for people in poverty, but Kurt is far too efficient. If he continues working there will be no work left for anyone else. He is not angry with Kurt. In fact, based on what he has seen, Kurt's skill is at least double S rank, if not triple his rank, so he would be better off working in the royal capital or somewhere similar. He gives Kurt a one-time payment as compensation for firing him so suddenly, and then departs. However, Kurt completely misunderstands the situation and believes Marga simply wanted to get rid of him for being a terrible worker. He returns to the temporary employment agency and finds Kiru to tell her that he was fired and that it will still be a few days until his work attributes can be evaluated. At that moment, they hear a commotion at the reception desk. It appears a girl is trying to post a recruitment advertisement, but the receptionist says that no one would agree to work under such poor conditions with what she is offering. Even so, the girl continues to insist that the receptionist try to find someone, and she begins to cause an uproar. Kitu goes to see what the problem is. Kyu's colleague says the girl wants to recruit a miner to excavate a mountain that has not yet been explored, but she refuses to offer any advance payment and insists on paying only if the excavation is successful. Kyu agrees that no one in their right mind would accept these terms, so she tries to convince the girl to seek investors to develop the mine. However, the girl says she cannot do that because if she does not pay her taxes by the end of the week, her mine will be confiscated. At that moment, Kurt approaches and says he is crazy enough to accept a job like that. After all, in his village, he used to help with mine excavation, so he has a good amount of experience. Kiryu asks Kurt if he's certain he wants to accept because under the contract the girl is offering, it is entirely possible that he will receive nothing. Before Kurt can answer, the girl interrupts him, stating that she had actually hoped to hire a strong dwarf rather than a little boy who appears defenseless, so she would feel guilty making Kurt work on this task. However, any dwarf would demand an advance payment of at least 10 silver coins, and the girl does not have that much money available. Therefore, she decides to hire Kurt anyway. As Kurt and the girl depart, Kichu feels uneasy about letting him accept this job as it is likely not worth the effort. Honestly, she thinks Kurt would be better off working in a brothel because she would spend her entire salary just to spend one night with him. While she is daydreaming about Kurt, her colleague catches her attention, mentioning that a bank transfer has just arrived. Apparently, it is the remainder of the money Marga promised to send. It is the compensation for all the work Kurt performed on the wall. Q expected it to be something like 50 silver coins, but it is actually a check for 200 gold coins, which is an immense amount of money. She's so shocked that Kurt actually managed to earn that much money that she ends up tripping over the sandbags on the floor. Her colleague approaches, telling her to be careful with them because they are not ordinary sandbags. In fact, they are used to measure the amount of mana a person possesses, and they are supposed to become heavier when someone with a large mana reserve touches them. They generally do not react to common people, so Kityu is able to lift them quite easily. However, she remembers seeing Kurt having great difficulty when he tried to lift them a few days ago, so she begins to wonder if he truly is just an ordinary boy. Meanwhile, Kurt and Alicia are walking through the forest to reach her camp, but when they arrive, Kurt becomes a bit concerned because there's only one tent. Uli says the tent is large enough for both of them to sleep close together, but Kurt says he could never sleep while being next to a girl as beautiful as she is. Upon hearing Kurt call her beautiful, Alicia becomes irritated because she thinks he's merely trying to flatter her, but Kurt says he truly believes is beautiful, realized that Kurt spoke sincerely, so she relaxes and hands him a potato for dinner. It is just a simple boiled potato, but it has been a long time since anyone cooked for Kurt, so he truly appreciates it. He is also grateful for the fact that Alicia is sitting with him him to eat because 𝐂𝐨𝐵 and the others from the heroes party always refuse to let Kurt eat in the same place as them. Later that night, Kurt and 𝐵𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆 go to sleep, but Kurt has difficulty falling asleep because 𝐂𝐵𝒆 went to sleep in her underwear. He could never sleep that way, so he decides to leave the tent during the night and sleep outside. As soon as Kurt leaves the tent, 𝐂𝐵𝒆 opens her eyes because she was only pretending to sleep. She went to sleep in her underwear on purpose to see if Kurt was the type of person who would attack her while she slept, but now she knows he is a good person. Furthermore, she finds him quite handsome and fun to tease. The next morning, Alicia wakes up and exits the tent. She finds Kurt sleeping near a tree and feels a bit bad for making him sleep out there, but then she notices that her jacket has been repaired. When Kurt wakes up, she asks if it was he who repaired her jacket, and he confirms it. She's impressed that he has such a talent for sewing and begins to wonder if he will actually be good at mining. But it is too late to find someone else, so it is better for them to start working. Kurt asks 𝐂𝐵𝒆 if she has already decided on a place to begin mining, but she was simply going to dig in random locations and hope to find some valuable ore. Kurt says she will never find anything searching that way, and as it happens, he knows a much more efficient method. He leads 𝐂𝐵𝒆 to a part of the mountain, and after observing for a bit, finds a rock full of gemstones. 𝐂𝐵𝒆 is shocked that he found it so easily, but in a matter of minutes, Kurt locates all the gemstones in that part of the mountain. Alicia can hardly believe it because if she sells all these gems, she will be able to pay off her debt. However, Kurt says she cannot sell them, realizes he is right, since it was Kurt who found all of them, so he should keep the money. But that was not what he meant. He was only trying to tell her that the gems would be more valuable if he transformed them into magic crystals first. Kurt is correct about this, but 𝐂𝐵𝒆 says there are only 10 mages in the entire kingdom who are skilled enough to transform gems into magic crystals. Yet, while she was saying this, Kurt simply finished transforming a gem into a magic crystal. 𝐂𝐵𝒆 is too shocked to speak because not only did Kurt create a magic crystal, but also did so instantaneously, whereas even the most experienced mages require at least an hour to produce a single magic crystal. After Kurt finishes transforming all the gems into crystals, he agrees to let 𝐂𝐵𝒆 go sell them. She departs while he remains on the mountain, as there are still several things he wishes to complete first. 𝐂𝐵𝒆 goes to the city's customs agency and states that she wants to sell some magic crystals in the royal capital. However, crystals are incredibly valuable, so the agent inquires where she obtained them. There is no way he would believe her if she said a random boy created them. So she shows her royal family emblem to make him stop asking questions. This is a complete fabrication, as she stopped working for the royal family some time ago, and they simply forgot to take back her emblem. Nevertheless, it works, and the customs agent allows her to use the teleportation circle to travel to the capital. Once she arrives, she goes to the shop of an old friend and tells 𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 that she has some magic gems to sell. 𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 takes a look at them, and at first, they do not seem to be worth much. But upon closer examination, she discovers they possess 10 times the normal amount of imbued mana. Consequently, these crystals are worth 10 gold coins each. Alicia is speechless because Kurt gave her 50 of them, and 𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 casually hands her a bag containing 500 gold coins. But before 𝐂𝐵𝒆 leaves, 𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 makes 2 requests. First, she wants 𝐂𝐵𝒆 to promise to sell crystals like these only at that shop, because it would be a disaster if such powerful crystals circulated without regulation. Secondly, she wants to know the name of the person who created the crystals. Agrees to the first condition, but says she cannot tell 𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 the name of the creator because she would have to ask his permission first. 𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 is a mage of the royal family, so she tries to use her position to order 𝐂𝐵𝒆 to reveal the information about the mysterious mage. However, 𝐂𝐵𝒆 no longer works for the royal family, and is therefore not obligated to obey 𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆. 𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 realizes she will not be able to convince 𝐂𝐵𝒆 to reveal Kurt's information, so she at least asks her to ensure that he does not leave for another nation. She also wants 𝐂𝐵𝒆 to tell him that if he accepts a position working for the royal family, 𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 is prepared to grant him the title of Count and full access to the Royal Research Laboratory, along with all its benefits. 𝐂𝐵𝒆 then leaves 𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆's shop and returns to the mountain the next morning to find Kurt. But she is shocked to discover that Kurt has built an entire house in the time she was away. Putting that aside, 𝐂𝐵𝒆 explains that a friend wants to hire him as a royal mage. If he accepts the position, he will be treated as a noble and will have a guaranteed high salary with benefits. Regardless of the circumstances, Kurt finds it difficult to believe he is truly being offered such an impressive job. However, 𝐂𝐵𝒆 assures him it is a genuine offer. She asks what he wants to do, but Kurt says he will decline. Alicia cannot believe Kurt would refuse because anyone would accept the chance to become a royal mage. Furthermore, it is shocking because Kurt's reason for refusing is quite silly. He believes he does not deserve to be in a position that places him above other people, and he still hopes to return to his handyman role with the Blazing Dragon Fang, even if he has to beg them to let him back in. Speaking of the Blazing Dragon Fang, they are currently being badly beaten by a tree monster. 𝐂𝐨𝒆 is unable to use his fire magic for some reason, so he asks Maris to heal him. She has been trying to do so for a while, but her healing magic is not functioning as it normally does. 𝐂𝐨𝒆 asks the newcomer to cast some fire magic to defeat the tree, but the newcomer does not know how to use fire magic, which was supposed to be 𝐂𝐨𝒆's job. In any case, the group's chemistry has completely vanished. Without Kurt there, they have become disjointed, and Bandana is the only one who can perceive that the group is falling apart. Returning to Kurt, his current job is still helping Wulia mine gems, and he mentions that he found a good vein of gems yesterday, so he can obtain many more for her. Alicia is grateful for his enthusiasm, but is concerned that Kurt might be tired from all the work he did yesterday. However, he tells her not to worry, because he slept for 6 hours last night. Alicia is shocked to hear this, and begins to do the math mentally to understand how Kurt managed to build an entire house and still sleep for 6 hours. Kurt interprets this as Ulysses being angry because he overslept, so he apologizes and says he will make up for his laziness. Truly needs to explain Kurt's strength to him at some point, but she has no idea how to approach the subject, so she and Kurt simply head out to mine more gems. Kurt leads Ulysses to the location he found, and even though it looks like an ordinary part of the forest, Kurt says she should be able to find good gems there. However, he warns her not to dig deeper than 500 𝐵𝒖𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆, as if that were something anyone could do by accident. He then begins to walk away, and when Ulysses asks where he is going, Kurt explains that he is heading to another mining spot and will meet her later. 𝐂𝐨𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆 spends the entire day digging, and as night falls, she finally finds a massive topaz gem. She deposited all the gold coins obtained from the magic crystals into Kurt's account because he was the one who found them. However, since she found this topaz on her own, she can use the profit to pay her taxes. She could likely even convince Kurt to transform it into a magic gem to earn even more money, but she decides not to do so because she does not want to take advantage of Kurt's kindness. Speaking of Kurt, she decides to see how he is doing. Based on what she had seen him do so far, she knew he would overdo it, but she did not expect him to have constructed an entire system of tunnels in 8 hours. Eventually, Kurt emerges and tells Ulysses that unfortunately, he only managed to find a little of the gem he was looking for. Everything else he found was just a pile of useless rocks, so he plans to throw them away once he is finished there. 𝐂𝐨𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆 looks inside the cart of rocks, and those stones look far too beautiful to be useless, so she asks what they are. Kurt explains that they are mithril oris, but in Kurt's village, mithril was so common in the mines that they usually threw it away when they found it. Alicia is speechless at what she has just heard. Besides wanting to know what kind of village Kurt came from, she asks what gem he was searching for, since he considers made to be trash. Kurt pulls out a small stone and says he was looking for ora alum, but he only managed to find enough to fill a small box. Orichalcum is known as the metal of the gods, so even a grain of it is worth millions, and Kurt simply found a box of it as if it were nothing. Alicia had no idea that orichalcum could be found in such places, but Kurt says that minerals can potentially be found anywhere. One simply has to dig 8 kilometers underground to reach them. Decides that this is enough mining for today, and since the topaz she found will cover her taxes, her contract with Kurt comes to an end. This means Kurt needs to start looking for another job because no one has told him yet about the mountain of gold in his bank account. While on his way to the agency, Kurt encounters Bandana and is happy to see her, but he asks what she is doing there. Bandana says she is no longer part of the Blazing Dragon Fang. But there is a bit more to the story. After the disastrous mission, 𝐂𝐨𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆 went to a 5-star restaurant to eat something good, but compared to Kurt's cooking, everything there tasted like trash. 𝐂𝐨𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆 became furious, destroyed the place, and left without paying. Upon entering an alley, he finds Bandana, and she tells him he went too far by destroying that restaurant. However, all 𝐂𝐿𝒆 cares about is getting good food, so he orders Bandana to find Kurt and force him to return, even if she has to break his bones to do so. 𝐂𝐿𝒆 is clearly losing his sanity, so Bandana does not argue with him about it. She simply takes 𝐂𝐿𝒆's teleportation crystal and runs out of the alley. As she leaves, she sees the city guards approaching 𝐂𝐿𝒆's location, and without that teleportation crystal, he will definitely be arrested for what he did at the restaurant. Furthermore, Maris was called to the church, so the Blazing Dragon Fang group is officially finished. However, she leaves out most of the details regarding 𝐂𝐿𝒆 having completely snapped. Kurt is disappointed to learn that the group has disbanded because it means he can no longer return, but Banna does not understand why he would want to go back in the first place. Kurt explains that he owes a lot to 𝐂𝐿𝒆, still not realizing what an idiot 𝐂𝐿𝒆 was, so he is very sad that he can no longer work with him. Bandana, on the other hand, never cared much for 𝐂𝐿𝒆 as he was merely a front so that she could keep an eye on Kurt. In any case, since Kurt was heading to the agency, Bandana presumes he's looking for a job, and if that is the case, she has the perfect opportunity for him. A friend of hers has been looking for someone to help in her workshop lately, and it should be a good job since this friend is an 8-layer Meister. There are only a few 8 Misters in the world, and they are all extremely important with influence comparable to that of a Viscount. Bandana asks Kurt if he wants to accept the job, and he says he would love to, so she hands him the map and sends him on his way. So Kurt finally arrives at the 8 Misters workshop, but he is slightly confused as the place appears to be an ordinary house to him. He knocks on the door and a small elf girl answers. Initially, Kurt is somewhat surprised because he did not expect the Alea Meister to be a young girl, but Michelle explains that she is actually the Meister's assistant. In that case, Kurt tells her that he is there for work, and Michelle is delighted to hear this because she needs all the help she can get. She leads Kurt to the kitchen, and as soon as he steps inside, he detects a horrific smell. Michelle apologizes for the mess, explaining that the Meister has been been making her work non-stop, so she has not yet had a chance to clean everything properly. At that moment, the Meister calls for Michelle, so she runs off and asks Kurt to help her clean the kitchen. Kurt is a bit disappointed as he thought he would be assisting the 8th Meister, but domestic chores are simple enough for him, so he begins to work. Half an hour later, Kurt has already cleaned the entire kitchen. Since Michelle did not specify what he should do next, he begins to wander through the hallways looking for her. He finds a door in one of the corridors, knocks, and a girl inside tells him to enter. However, when Kurt enters, he sees the girl practically naked on the bed. He is embarrassed and apologizes for the intrusion, but she does not seem bothered by him seeing her that way. Kurt explains that he is looking for Michelle, and the girl informs him that Michelle is in the basement. Kurt is about to leave to find her, but then he notices a dark mark on the girl's stomach. Kurt recognizes it as a curse, so he asks if he can take a closer look. She grants permission, so Kurt approaches and begins to examine the cursed area. Curses like this generally destroy the internal organs surrounding the affected area, so it must be extremely difficult for the girl to eat. However, it appears her stomach is still intact, so Kurt offers to prepare some food for her. Meanwhile, 𝑒𝐿𝐵𝒖𝒄𝒊𝒆 meets with Mimiko. The two discuss the 𝐵𝒖𝒄𝒊𝒆, an oral comb that Kurt found. Kurt did not even transform them into magic crystals this time, yet the value still exceeds 50,000 gold coins. So 𝐿𝐵𝒖𝒄𝒊𝒆 begins to grow concerned. She asks Mimiko what she thinks will happen if people discover Kurt's ability. In the best case scenario, Kurt will be kidnapped and forced into slavery. In the worst case scenario, he will be assassinated for being too great a threat. Mimiko asks 𝐿𝐿𝐵𝒆 what she plans to do with Kurt, and so far 𝐿𝐿𝐵𝒆 has thought about preparing him to become an 8-year Meister himself. That way, he would have enough power so that no one could take advantage of him, and she plans to work as his bodyguard. However, making Kurt agree to all of this will be difficult. He's too naive to realize how skilled he truly is, and even worse, he constantly underestimates himself. So 𝐿𝐿𝐵𝒆 needs to act before Kurt ends up in trouble. Meanwhile, Kurt has just finished cooking porridge for the girl he met earlier, when suddenly Michelle and the 𝐿𝐴 Meister emerge from the basement. The two are surprised to see that the kitchen is no longer a biohazard, and even more so to realize that Kurt cleaned it in such a short time. The Meister, 𝐿𝐵𝒆, notices that Kurt is preparing porridge, so Kurt explains that the girl he found in one of the rooms said she was hungry. 𝐿𝐵𝒆 seems a bit worried that Kurt found that girl, so she makes him promise not to tell anyone about her. Kurt promises, so 𝐿𝐵𝒆 says he can go home for today and hands him 3 silver coins. Kurt is surprised she's paying so much just for cleaning the kitchen, but she says he deserves it for working so hard and asks him to return tomorrow. A bit later, 𝐿𝐵𝒆 goes to the girl's room with a porridge Kurt made for her and reminds her that she must not let other people see her. Other than that, Kurt does not seem like a threat, so 𝐿𝐵𝒆 does not think she will need to worry about him revealing the secret. Lai has not eaten yet, so 𝐿𝐵𝒆 asks her to wait a minute while she tests the porridge for poison. However, Lee says there is no need for that. She spoke with Kurt for only a short time, but her intuition tells her he is a good person. Furthermore, there would be no point in trying to poison her when the curse has already advanced so far. She has had to live her life suspecting everyone around her, so just this once, she wants to trust someone completely. 𝐿𝐵𝒆 understands and lets her eat the porridge, but after she takes the first spoonful, she begins to sweat profusely and collapses onto the floor. Consequently, 𝐿𝐵𝒆 thinks that Kurt truly did poison the food. She's about to initiate a hunt to kill him, but suddenly Lee stands up and says she is fine. In reality, she feels better than ever because the curse has just been broken. Lai has no idea how to process what just happened, as a curse of that magnitude is not easily undone. Nevertheless, it was undoubtedly broken by the food that Kurt prepared. Meanwhile, the secret organization that placed the curse on Lai is holding a meeting because they have just discovered that the curse has been lifted. They had hoped to use it to safely kill Lee from a distance, but now they will have to resort to more drastic measures. Later that night, 𝐿𝐵𝒆 and Lee go to Mimiko's shop because they have something urgent to discuss. Lai removes her hood, and as soon as Mimiko and 𝐿𝐵𝒆 see her face, they recognize her as the 3rd princess of the nation. 𝐿𝐵𝒆 explains that a powerful curse was placed on Lee in an attempt to assassinate her. They are not certain who is behind it, but Lee is the only daughter of the king and Princess Fran of the 𝒂𝒴𝒄𝒄 kingdom. Thus, her existence serves as a symbol of peace between the two nations. Clearly, someone is attempting to incite a war. Mimiko is happy that Lee is well, but is surprised that she managed to break such a powerful curse on her own. However, Lee says she was not alone. The curse was actually broken by a man named Kurt. And as soon as the two hear Kurt's name, they are shocked. 𝐿𝐵𝒆 is still having difficulty believing it. The curse that had been tormenting Lee for years was broken by a bowl of porridge. At this point, she already knows that Kurt can do absurd things, but she literally left him alone for half a day, and he ended up saving the princess. They intend to reward Kurt for his help eventually, but before that, Mimiko believes it is important for them to find the person responsible for the curse. Generally, there are anti-curse spells in Lee's room, so someone must have tampered with them before she was cursed. There are only 3 people in the kingdom who had access to Lee's room at that time: 𝐂𝐨𝐴𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆, the general of the Royal Expeditionary Force, Tristama, the bishop of the church, and Isidora, the 3rd queen of the realm. However, they cannot go around making false accusations, so they will need to obtain concrete evidence before taking action. Alicia suggests that they set a trap to lure the culprit out. She already has a perfect plan in mind. Lai has recently turned 15, and royal customs dictate that she must leave home and train for a year. The people behind the assassination attempt will certainly try to reach her again. Therefore, Alicia plans to create a fake 𝐂𝐨𝐴𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 and claim that Lee was sent there to train. The assassins will likely try to obtain information about the 𝐂𝐨𝐴𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 to plan an attack, and when they do, they will fall straight into Alicia's trap. However, they will need to find someone with significant achievements to become the fake 𝐂𝐨𝐴𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆. Alicia has the perfect person in mind. She shows Alicia one of the magic crystals Kurt made, and as soon as Alicia sees it, she has no doubt it is the highest quality crystal she has ever seen. Speaking of Kurt, the next day, he returns to Alicia's house for work. But when he arrives, he finds a note on the door stating she is out. He then finds Michelle and asks what is happening. Michelle explains that after he left yesterday, Alicia suddenly departed with Lai, and they have not yet returned. Unfortunately, this means there is no work for Kurt today, so he leaves the house disappointed and goes to the guild to eat. While eating, he overhears a group at the next table. They are in a panic because their porter has fallen ill, and without him, they will not be able to handle their next mission. Kurt thinks about it and is certain he can do the work of a porter. So he goes to their table and introduces himself, mentioning that he overheard their conversation. Although he's terrible at combat, he's confident he can be useful to the team as a porter. Estina mocks the idea of Kurt becoming their porter because a thin boy like him could never handle such heavy work. Ken slaps her on the head and apologizes to Kurt for his sister's rude behavior, but he also does not believe Kurt could do the job. It is a very physically demanding task, especially since the group is hunting golems that weigh over 200 𝐾𝐴. However, Kurt says he can carry 200 kg easily. In fact, to prove it, he lifts both of them on the spot, making it seem effortless. Even with Ken wearing over 150 kilos of armor, Kurt definitely proves he is capable. So the group agrees to hire him as a porter. While they are on their way to the mission site, everyone introduces themselves properly to Kurt. Ken is the group's heavy warrior, but even though he carries a sword, he generally prefers to fight with his fists. Meanwhile, Danzo is a samurai, and Athena is an archer. They also have another teammate, but he is ill with a cold. Therefore, they had to hire Kurt to replace him for today. They say they are happy to have him on the team, and Kurt thanks them for giving a chance to an incompetent nobody like himself. They do not understand what he is talking about, as an incompetent person would not be able to lift 400 kg as if it were a warm-up, but they consider it merely Kurt's sense of humor. The group continues walking, but suddenly Kurt screams because he has just been attacked. They all immediately turn to save him, but are confused when they see him struggling against a slime. Kurt is truly in a panic, but Estina tells him to calm down because all he needs to do is destroy the slime's core to kill it. Kurt tries to follow the advice, but when he attempts to pierce the slime's core, his knife simply cannot penetrate it, and somehow he ends up stabbing himself instead. Clearly, Kurt will not be able to kill it alone, so Athena takes care of the slime for him, but she is surprised by how poor Kurt's attacking skills are. He mentioned that his combat ability is almost 0, but she did not imagine it would be quite that bad. Kurt apologizes for being so useless, but everyone tells him he does not need to worry about it because his job as a porter is to transport the mission items so he can leave all the fighting to them. Kurt can hardly believe what he is hearing. He has just failed miserably. Yet his teammates are not angry with him. This is nothing like the way he was treated when he was with the blazing dragon fang. So he is happy to have found such kind companions. Eventually they reach the cave, but it is quite dark, so Estina spreads some glowing moss around to illuminate the environment. When the cave is lit, Kurt notices some droppings on a rock, so he asks Estina if they should be concerned. Estina tells him the droppings are from goblins, and considering how fresh they are, there is likely a goblin nest somewhere in that cave. Kurt panics slightly since if he cannot kill a slime, there is no way he can defeat a goblin, but Ken says there is no need to worry as the rest of them can handle a few goblin. However, if they encounter a goblin horde, they would have no chance at all, so they must avoid that at all costs. They continue moving deeper into the cave and arrive at some ruins. While walking, Kurt notices something strange on the wall. At that moment, Estina spots a goblin and tries to kill it as quickly as possible, but it is already too late. The goblin had already called for reinforcements, and now they can hear a massive horde of goblins approaching from both the front and the back. The reports did not mention there would be so many goblins there, and now they have nowhere to run. Estina turns to Danzo to ask if he has a plan,
but given the situation, the only thing they can do is prepare for a brutal death. Kurt tells everyone that he found a secret passage in the wall. This is excellent news, but even with the passage, they will not be able to outrun the goblins.
So they need a distraction. Danzo and Ken signal Athena, and she understands what they are asking her to do, so she takes Kurt into the secret room and closes the door behind him. Kurt does not understand why she did this, since Danzo and Ken are still on the other side of the door, but that was exactly what they wanted. Ken tells Kurt that the goblins will pursue all of them if they flee together, so he and Danzo will try to lure them away to give Kurt and Estina a chance to escape. Kurt does not want to leave them behind, but Estina says they cannot go back. She also does not want to abandon her companions, but Kurt has no combat skills and Estina's fighting abilities are average at best, so they would only hinder the two of them. Furthermore, she says she is certain that Danzo and Ken will find some way to survive. But that was pure delusional consolation because Danzo and Ken know they are going to die there. Still, they do not regret the decision because dying while protecting their friends is the greatest honor a warrior could have. Athena tells Kurt they need to move, so she spreads some glowing moss around the area to search for an exit. To her horror, she discovers that this is not an ordinary secret room, it is a boss room, and now they are trapped inside with an iron dragon. Meanwhile, back in the city, Lee wants to find Kurt again, so she asks Alicia to take her to his lodgings. After Aaliyah picks the lock, she and Lee enter Kurt's room, but to their surprise, he is not there. Suddenly, they hear a voice saying that if they are looking for Kurt, he went on a mission to the northeast caves. Alicia has no idea who is speaking, so she rushes out of the room to confront this person. However, by the time she gets outside, Ben has already vanished. She's confused by what just happened, but Kurt really is in the northeast caves and could be in serious trouble. From what Alicia knows, a training program for hunting goblins was recently conducted near those caves. Oh, some surviving goblins might have established a nest in that cave. Alishaya tells Lee to wait for her because she's going to help Kurt, but Lee says she wants to go as well. Does not think it is a good idea as taking a princess into a cave full of monsters is not exactly safe, but Lai has been training her magic since she was a child, so she is confident she can defend herself. Furthermore, Ulishia is supposed to be protecting her, so it would be unwise to leave her alone. Ulishia eventually agrees to take her along, so the two head to the cave, and by the fresh, glowing moss on the walls, they can tell that someone was there recently. Lai casts a sensory enhancement spell on herself, and Ulishia thinks she is going to try to hear signs of Kurt, but Lai kneels and begins to sniff for him. She was near him for 10 minutes at most, but that was enough to memorize his scent, and after sniffing a bit more, she finds Kurt's trail. She also hears a fight happening down that corridor, so she warns Ulishia and grants her a status boost so she can help. Danzo and Ken have been fighting quite well against the goblins for a while, but at this pace, they will not hold out much longer. Fortunately, before any of them could be mortally wounded, Olisha rushes in and cuts down all the goblins with a single strike. Meanwhile, inside the secret room, Estina falls to her knees in defeat because there is no way she can fight a dragon golem. She apologizes to Kurt for dragging him into this mess because now both of them are going to die there, but Kurt says there's nothing to worry about because he has dealt with many of these before. He begins walking toward the dragon, and the moment he is about to hit it, he leaps into the air and lands on its tail. Kurt then uses his dagger and with a light touch, completely severs the dragon's tail. He does the same with all the dragon's limbs, and Estina can hardly believe that the guy who could not kill a slime is defeating a dragon with such ease. She is honestly a bit frightened at this point, but Kurt does not understand why as mining golems is normal for him. At that moment, Ulisha rushes into the secret room to see if Kurt is okay and finds him in front of a pile of dragon golem parts. Kurt is happy to see her and asks her to save his friends because Danzo and Ken might still be in danger, but Ulisha says she has already saved them both and that although they are a bit injured, they will be fine. And now that everyone is safe, they gather in the secret room to discuss a few things. First, Ken and Danzo thank Ulisha for saving them as they would have died without her help, but Ulisha says they do not need to worry about it. More importantly, she has something to say to Kurt. And so, while she carries some parts of the dragon, she informs him that she is opening a new Ada. She asks if he would like to be a part of it, but Kurt thinks he cannot as he is currently working as part of that group. However, Ken says he does not need to worry about the group. Offer is a great opportunity, so he encourages Kurt to accept it. And since Ken and the others are in agreement, Kurt accepts the proposal. Also mentions that she needs to hire some adventurers to protect the alley shop, so she asks Ken and the others if they would be willing to take on that role, and they say they would love to. Since this is great news, Ken proposes that they have a party when they return to the city. And speaking of the city, Ulis reminds Kurt to have his skills evaluated when he returns to the agency because she found someone to conduct that evaluation for him. A few hours later, Kurt arrives at the agency and is introduced to Mimiko. She says she is a royal mage and that she has heard a lot about his impressive abilities, so she's there to evaluate his non-combat skills. When the evaluation ends, Mimiko tells Kurt that all of his non-combat skills are B rank, but that was a complete lie. According to the reading she took, All of Kurt's skills are SSS rank, and his latent potential is greater than anything she has ever seen before. She's glad she was the one who performed the aptitude test, because it would be a national disaster if anyone discovered how strong Kurt really is. In fact, they would likely have to kill any witnesses on the spot, which is terrible news for Kichu, since she ended up overhearing everything. The group heads immediately to the city the following day where the Ada will be established. However, 𝐂𝐨𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 never specified who the new 𝐂𝐴Tier would be, so everyone is excited to meet this person. 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 cannot tell the truth either, so she begins making up excuses on the fly. By this point, Estina has already realized that 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 did not hire their group out of kindness, and she began acting strangely when Ken asked about the 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆. Consequently, Estina is becoming very suspicious. As they approach the city, Kurt notices it is the same city where he built that wall, and he still believes 𝒏𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆 fired him for being a poor worker, so he feels bad about being there again. Finally leads everyone to the site of the new Aaliyah, but calling it a workshop makes no sense because it is clearly a vacant lot. Ken says he cannot do anything with an empty lot, and obviously 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 knows this, so she says they will simply wait at an inn until Kurt finishes building the entire alley. She asks Kurt if he can finish by the end of the day, but even for Kurt, building an entire 8 in one day is completely surreal. However, he says he will likely be able to finish in 3 days. 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 says he can take as much time as he wants because she does not want to rush him, and that if he needs extra materials for the Ada, he can ask her. Kurt is happy to hear this, as he already has a list of items in mind, so he writes it down and asks 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 to obtain the materials for him. The items on the list include things such as amethyst and griffin feathers, so Estina asks why Kurt would need those if he is just going to build an heir, but 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 knows it is better not to question him. She simply says she will do her best to acquire these items, though it will take some time to gather them, so Kurt will have to wait 2 days, and he does not mind that. Estina still cannot ignore the feeling that something is wrong, and 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 is beginning to notice her suspicion. But both pretend everything is normal for now. Tells everyone to go immediately to the inn so that Kurt can work in peace. But before they go, she reminds Kurt that he needs to rest and eat. She makes him promise to return to the inn at nightfall. Meanwhile, when the others arrive at the inn, 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 makes everyone sit down because she has something important to say. Until now, Ken and Danzo thought Kurt was just an ordinary person, but 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 cannot hide the truth forever, especially since Estina has already seen some of the absurd things Kurt is capable of. Estina asks 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 to explain who Kurt is, but before that, 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 wants to introduce herself properly. She displays the royal family crest and says she is an adventurer working for the royal family, and the lady sitting before them is 𝐿𝒆, the 3rd princess of the kingdom. The 3 are completely shocked to hear this, and Ken feels he should stand up to greet her properly, but 𝐿𝒆 says that will not be necessary. She is hiding her identity at the moment, so she asks that they continue treating her as if she were an ordinary girl. Athena asks if this means Kurt is also royalty, but 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 informs her that he is a commoner. Not exactly common, but he is not a noble. The truth is that 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 still has no idea who Kurt really is, but she knows that while all his combat skills are G rank, literally every other skill he possesses is SSS rank. The 3 are speechless upon hearing this because SSS rank skills are practically an urban legend, but considering Kurt's capabilities, it makes sense. 𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒆 says that Kurt's true skill level is currently confidential information, so none of them can speak about it. Not even Kurt knows his own level, as 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒆 and 𝒏𝒄𝒄 lied and told him he was only B rank. In reality, the new alearmeister will be Kurt himself, but 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒆 has no intention of telling him the truth yet. Estina stands up furiously and shouts at 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒆 because she cannot understand why she would lie to Kurt in this manner. 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒆 says that Kurt probably would not believe her even if she told him the truth. She tries to justify herself by saying she's only trying to keep Kurt safe, because if the information about his abilities became public, people might try to exploit him. But from what Estina can see, it is 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒆 who is exploiting Kurt. Now has no response to this, so she simply remains in silence. Estina then turns away because she wants nothing to do with all this confusion. After a while, Danzo asks for more information. So 𝐿𝒆 shares that just a few days ago, Kurt broke a deadly curse that had been placed upon her, and he accomplished this using a bowl of porridge. Someone is currently attempting to take 𝐿𝒆's life, and that is why this entire plan by the 8th Master was created. The idea is to lure the assassins out and find the person behind all of this, but again, Kurt knows nothing about any of this. It might seem selfish to drag him into the plan without telling him the truth, but both lie and truly care about him, so they would never want anything bad to happen to Kurt. 𝐿𝒆 asked them if they would be willing to keep the secret. In this way, they would join forces to ensure Kurt's safety. As adventurers, Danzo says they have no obligation to obey orders from a member of royalty, but Kurt is their friend, so they will do anything to protect him. Ken feels the same way, and 𝐿𝒆 is happy to know that they are in agreement, but Estina thinks they are going going too far. Since they have known Kurt for only 2 days, 𝐂𝐨𝐵 understands how Estina feels, because although they speak of Kurt as if he were an old friend, the truth is that she met him literally last week, and she is still having difficulty believing everything she has seen him do in these last few days. Aina says she needs to take a walk to clear her mind before making any hasty decisions, and while she is out, she begins walking toward Kurt's workplace because she thinks he should know the truth about his strength. But to her total shock, in these few hours since they left, Kurt has already finished building the foundation of the atelier. She asks if he really did all of that by himself, and Kurt confirms that he thinks all of this is normal since Yulia said he is rank B, but obviously no rank B worker could achieve something like that. Kurt's understanding of the ranks is totally distorted, and the fact that in his village, people build 12 houses in a single day does not help, so from Kurt's point of view, he's moving much slower than he should be. Athena still thinks it is wrong that he's using Kurt to build the 𝐂𝐨𝐴, and so she asks if he is upset about having all this work thrown upon his shoulders. However, Kurt says he has no reason to be upset because in reality, he enjoys doing it. When he was part of the heroes party, they always called him useless and even expelled him, but here, everyone recognizes how useful he is, and that is more than he could ask for. Meanwhile, Danzo is in the town square because he needs to meet with an important informant who looks very much like Bandana. Danzo's group only hired Kurt because their porter fell ill, but it turns out that the porter 𝐵𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆 was actually a spy who joined Danzo's group with the sole objective of destroying them from the inside. He was apparently hired by a rival group of adventurers who were jealous of how well Danzo's group was doing. She has already located 𝐵𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆 and provided detailed instructions on how to find him, so Danzo is free to use that information as he wishes. Danzo then pays her for a job well done, and later that night he goes to a tavern. At one of those tables is the bald and disgusting fellow who is complaining to himself because not only did the waitress look at him with disgust after he tried to touch her, but also his plan to kill Danzo's group failed completely. However, he already has a new plan ready because he received information that Danzo's group is working on an 8 for the royalty, which has connections to the 3rd princess, and so if he targets that, he will surely make a lot of money. Danzo then asks if he is enjoying his last drink. As soon as 𝐵𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆 realizes it is Danzo, he enters a panic and begins to flee. 𝐵𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆 runs through the alley but ends up tripping over a well-positioned wire, so he falls to the ground while Danzo approaches slowly. Initially, Danzo had ignored 𝐵𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆's strange behavior when he said he was sick during that mining mission, but now Danzo is certain that all of it was a setup. 𝐵𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆 tries to pretend he has no idea what Danzo is talking about, but it is already too late for that. Then Danzo draws his sword and delivers a strike to 𝐵𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆's neck, but at the last second decides to let him live. He prefers not to soil his hands with blood because of this, so he warns 𝐵𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆 to stay away from him and his friends, otherwise next time he will not be so merciful. Danzo then leaves, and from behind a corner, we see Bandana observing everything. She is disappointed that Danzo did not finish the job because 𝐵𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆 will likely be a problem in the future, so now she will have to finish him off personally. However, before she can do anything, 2 hooded men appear suddenly and begin to take 𝐵𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆 away. Bandana recognizes them as members of the Ghost Squad who operate directly under the command of 𝐵𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆. She wonders why a royal court mage would be involved in something like this, but then she receives a letter from her messenger Crow. It is from her superior, telling her to avoid interfering too much. This is because the matter is under Maras's jurisdiction. Once again, Bandana is disappointed, but she has clear orders not to interfere with Maras's operation, and since there is nothing more for her to do there, it is time to return to Kurt's hometown. But speaking of Maras, things are not going well for her at all, because she has been captured and is being held inside a magic circle. Back in the city, Danzo and Ken wake up the next morning and are completely shocked when they see the 8 that Kurt managed to build. He even had time to install trees and fences, and no one has any idea how he managed to make them grow in a single day. While the others are impressed, 𝐿𝒆 is busy fantasizing about marrying Kurt and living there with him for the rest of her life. At that moment, Kurt comes out to greet everyone and invites them to enter. He gives a small tour of the house, including the main entrance, the 2 underground floors, and the water purification system, which he created using magic gems. He also made rooms for everyone, and a special room for the Alar Master. But speaking of that, 𝐿𝒆 still has not told Kurt who the 8-year master will be. She still does not want to tell Kurt that he is the master there, so she makes up an excuse saying that the 8 master is busy. Next, she tries to change the subject by asking Kurt where his room is, but the boy's self-esteem is so low that he thinks he does not deserve a room since all he is good for is doing chores. He is planning to sleep in a broom closet, but everyone immediately refuses to let that happen. They tell Kurt to use the room he made for the alley master since no one is using it at the moment, but it takes them 2 hours to convince him to accept it. As a side note, 𝐿𝒆 asks Kurt if he can create a barrier around the house. That way, it would ward off curses, but Kurt has never tried to make a barrier before, so he's not sure if he will succeed. In that case, 𝐿𝒆 will have to settle for the barrier spells that 𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 made previously, so she spends the entire night installing them around the house. The last seal needs to be placed right in front of 𝐿𝒆's room, so 𝐿𝒆 goes there to hang it. But when 𝐿𝒆 hears footsteps outside her room, she thinks Kurt is trying to sneak in, so she runs to welcome him with open arms. However, upon seeing 𝐂𝐿𝒆𝒆, she is very disappointed because she was looking forward to spending the night in bed with Kurt. Tells her to stop thinking about strange things and warns 𝐿𝒆 not to take advantage of Kurt's innocence because, with how much he wants to be useful, if she asked for something of that sort, he would probably accept. The next morning, Kurt is preparing breakfast for everyone when Lee appears wearing only an apron. Alicia yells at her for trying to corrupt Kurt, but Lai says it is fine because she's actually wearing clothes underneath. Anyway, when breakfast is ready, everyone sits down to eat and they love the food Kurt made. But speaking of Kurt, Alicia wonders why he is not there with them. Lai remembers hearing Kurt say he wanted to do some cleaning since someone had made graffiti all over the walls of the mansion. Immediately realizes that he was probably talking about the barrier spells she installed. But normally it should not be possible to erase them with a cloth, but we are talking about Kurt, so she runs out to stop him. Unfortunately, she arrives too late because Kurt has already erased all the barrier spells and still thinks it was just ordinary graffiti since Lee never told him about the assassination attempted by Curse against Lai. Now, Lee is completely vulnerable to curses again, and 𝑚imiko is not there to create new barrier spells, so Lee does not know what to do. Meanwhile, Maris has been summoned by the bishop of the church, and as soon as she meets with him, he says she is being excommunicated. Maris cannot believe it and asks why this is happening. So the bishop explains that there is plenty of evidence, along with complaints, that the Dragon's Fangs group is violent and destructive. In fact, the bishop recently heard that 𝐂𝐨𝐵 is currently a wanted criminal. Therefore, the church no longer wants to be associated with Marlej. Marlej tries to explain herself, saying that she personally did nothing wrong except for the time she electrocuted a waiter to death.
But in her defense, she did not like the food he served. That excuse is quite flimsy. But the bishop is also not exactly a good person, so he tells Maris that he's willing to ignore her trivial sins and perhaps even grant her the position of priestess if she does one thing for him. As soon as Maris hears that she could be promoted to a priestess, her eyes widen with excitement. Thus, she is willing to do anything the bishop asks. The first thing the bishop does is pour a glass of wine.
Then he asks Maris to drink, but things take a completely different turn than she expected because the bishop says he wants her to help assassinate the third princess of the kingdom. Maris normally would never agree to something like that, but that wine she just drank placed a curse upon her, so she is condemned to die a painful death unless she agrees to assassinate the princess. With no other choice, she vows to help the bishop with his plan. And this plan involves trapping Mars in a magic circle with a demon nearby. While all of this is happening, things are quite normal at Kurt's mansion. Everyone is enjoying a great breakfast, and for some reason, Lai has not received any new curses. Despite the fact that Kurt raised all the protections against curses, Alicia still has not been able to figure out why. But since they have easy access to Kurt's magical cooking, it should be able to neutralize any curse cast upon Lee. In any case, it doesn't seem that she needs to worry about Lee's safety anymore, especially because 𝑚imiko has finally arrived in the city, and with the help of Lee, they have set up an information network that will lead them to anyone attempting to harm Lee. Lai notices that there is something different about the cake Kurt made today, so Kurt explains that he made it using rice flour instead of common flour. Lai loves the flavor because it reminds her of the rice porridge Kurt made for her when they first met. So she asks Kurt if he could make it for her again in case she's cursed another time. Kurt says he would be happy to make as much rice porridge as she wants, and Lai does not need to worry about being cursed again. Alicia is surprised to hear him say this, so she asks how he can be so sure, given that he said he could not create barriers against curses. Kurt confirms that he cannot create barriers inside the house, but that is only because the entire mansion already functions as a barrier against curses. This means that any magic related to curses will be reflected, even though Kurt has made some adjustments. By coincidence, the assassins who are after Lai decided to cast another curse on her. So the mage begins the ritual of his ultimate curse. But instead of working as expected, the curse simply disappears, and the mage ends up being cursed with a permanent flash effect on his face. Kurt configured the barrier to do this, since he did not want to accidentally kill someone with a reflected curse, even though the person probably deserved it, and this was a much better option. He is once again impressed by Kurt's skill, and she's happy that he's keeping Lai safe. But she needs to find Lai and 𝑚imiko so they can start looking for anyone who is glowing like a light bulb, since Alicia will be out for a while. Kurt approaches Lee asking if she would like to go shopping with him. Lai is in disbelief as she realizes that Kurt is basically inviting her on a date, but he just thought it would be good to take a walk around the city, especially since Lee has not left the mansion yet. Lai accepts the invitation, but given the circumstances, she cannot go out at all. Meanwhile, on the city walls, Mag and his son are worried because it seems that a horde of monsters is approaching the city. Although they probably do not need to worry that much because the walls have already been fully restored and the army is ready to fight at any moment. At the same time, Alicia, 𝑚imiko, and Lie have just found the light bulb man. But it seems claims he was killed by his own companions because taking him with them would draw too much attention. Still, 𝐂𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 is surprised to see that the glowing curse created by Kurt remains active even after the death of the target. And if he's capable of doing something like that in such a short time, Lee thinks they should simply tell everything to Kurt and ask for his help, as they would likely manage to find the assassins much faster that way. But 𝐂𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 says she does not want to involve Kurt, even though they have already involved him quite a bit up to this point. At that moment, alarm bells begin to ring throughout the city because the monsters have started to attack. 𝐂𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 orders all of his soldiers to cast light spells so they can see the monsters they are fighting. And to his horror, he sees an absurdly large horde of skeletons walking slowly toward the walls. There is no way his men can face so many at the same time. So he orders a group of soldiers to remain there with him to hold back the skeletons, even if it costs them their lives. Meanwhile, the rest must focus on evacuating as many citizens as possible. 𝐂𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 was completely prepared to sacrifice himself for his people. But to his surprise, as soon as the skeletons reach the walls, they all begin to suddenly disappear. 𝐂𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 has no idea what is happening, but then he remembers that this part of the wall was repaired by Kurt, and therefore presumes that he must have something to do with it. The entire army of skeletons ends up disappearing, and we return to Miles, who is still trapped in a magic circle. The bishop made a contract with this advanced demon to kill the princess, and the demon is using Maris's strength and magic power as if it were a battery to summon the monsters. And since the first wave has already failed, he intends to continue summoning skeletons until he completely drains Marlowe's mana and life force. Back in the city, Kurt has just heard about the monster attacks, so he asks 𝐂𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 if they will be alright, tells him that the city is surrounded by monsters on all sides, and although the knights are doing their best to devise a counter-attack strategy, there is not much they can do at the moment. The only reason the city is still standing now is that a large number of skeletons were purified as soon as they touched the walls. Kurt explains that he enchanted the walls when he repaired them, and things like that were quite common in his village, so he is surprised that the people here do not enchant their walls. That being said, Kurt was only able to work on 2 of the city's 4 walls, and so if the skeletons end up attacking the normal parts, they will break through quickly. Lie does the most sensible and intelligent thing, politely asking Kurt if he could simply create a weapon capable of eliminating all the skeletons. Kurt begins to think about this, but before he can do anything, Lie interrupts herself suddenly, saying she needs to go out for a while, and before leaving, she reminds Kurt and 𝐂𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 that they must not leave the mansion for any reason. 𝐂𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 is perfectly satisfied with this, as it means she will have some time alone with Kurt. And then 𝐂𝐵𝒄𝒆 goes to the storage room and takes a box full of magic crystals that Kurt made. With her secret weapon ready, Lie and Mimiko go to Maga to tell him their plan. Maga recognizes 𝐂𝐵𝒄𝒆 as they are old friends, but is surprised to see her in his city. 𝐂𝐵𝒄𝒆 says she has a plan to stop the skeleton horde, and since they seem to be coming from nearby ruins, she intends to go there and destroy their source of power. However, for this she needs 𝐂𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 and his men to act as bait, luring the skeletons so that she can reach the ruins. 𝐂𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 says the plan is too risky for him to agree to, but 𝐂𝐵𝒄𝒆 assures him that she is certain it will work, especially because she possesses a secret weapon. She shows him one of the magic crystals Kurt made and assures him that it has enough power to destroy a building. So it will be more than enough to destroy the ruins and stop the skeleton horde. Since 𝐂𝐵𝒄𝒆 is so determined, 𝐂𝐵𝒄𝒆 agrees to help her, but only on the condition that she allows him to accompany her on the mission. 𝐂𝐵𝒄𝒆 is strong enough to handle this, but asks if he is truly sure he wants to go because it will be very dangerous. 𝐂𝐵𝒄𝒆 refuses to back down as his duty is to ensure the safety of the city. Furthermore, while he is away, his vice general, Generic, can command the troops in his place. While the soldiers go out to distract the monsters, Mimiko and Leah can help protect the city from new attacks. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Kurt has just finished sweeping the garden when he begins to think about what he was going to say earlier regarding creating a weapon. He goes to the forge he built, and thus he begins to work on something. In his village, blacksmiths could always create incredible weapons with ease. And although Kurt still does not have much confidence in his abilities, he wants to be useful to his friends, so he is going to do everything he can to create a good weapon. At the same time, and 𝐂𝐵𝒄𝒆 are about to leave, but there is a horde of monsters blocking the exit, so she takes one of the magic crystals and prepares to use it. She warns all the soldiers to close their eyes, and as soon as the crystal hits the monsters, a blinding flash eliminates them completely. Bolia knew that Kurt's crystals were powerful, but she had no idea they were capable of purifying so many monsters at once. In any case, this works in their favor, so the soldiers go out to contain the next wave of monsters, while 𝐂𝐵𝒄𝒆 and 𝐂𝐵𝒄𝒆 head toward the ruins. Back at the mansion, Kurt has just finished forging the blade, but after providing the final touches, his insecurities begin to affect him. He was told that his blacksmithing skills were only rank B, so he does not believe that a sword made by him could be good enough to fight against the monsters. Shortly after, Lee goes to look for Kurt to ask about dinner, but then she notices the sword in his hand and thinks it is very beautiful. Kurt says she can keep the sword if she liked it that much, but she needs to be careful since he imbued it with a lot of magic. Lai thanks Kurt for the gift, But although Kurt may be distracted when it comes to his own skills, he knows how to recognize a forced smile. Obviously, there is something bothering Lai, and he would be lying if he said he had not noticed it before, so he asks Lai if someone is after her. She is surprised that Kurt noticed, but admits he is right and apologizes for all the trouble she has caused. Kurt says she does not need to worry, but Lai feels very bad because everyone is in constant danger because of her. In fact, at this moment, 𝐂𝐨𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 is out there risking her life because of Lee. Kurt may have realized someone is after Lai, but he still has no idea that she is a princess, or that protecting her is a matter of national security. All he knows is that 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 went to settle something at the nearby ruins, and he remembers a time when 𝐂𝐿𝐵 made graffiti all over those ruins, so he thinks 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 must be fighting a graffiti artist who has been stalking Lai. He is completely wrong in this conclusion, but that does not change the fact that 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 is fighting because of Lai, and Kurt is totally powerless to help her because his combat attributes are horrible. He cannot stand the feeling of not being able to protect those he cares about, and Lee feels the same, as she does not like the fact that people put themselves in danger because of her. She would prefer to fight to protect herself if she could. And since she brought up the subject, Kurt suggests that the two of them go out and capture the culprit on their own. Lai likes the idea, but asks how they will leave the city since it is completely surrounded by monsters at the moment. Kurt says that's not a problem as he has his own methods for dealing with this type of situation. And there on the battlefield, 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 suddenly has a bad feeling that Kurt is about to do something crazy again. Back at the mansion, Lee is preparing to go out for battle when she realizes she has not yet tested the magic blade that Kurt gave her. She is curious to discover what kind of magic it possesses, so she raises it above her head, but to her surprise, nothing happens. Kurt then enters the room to ask if Lai has finished preparing, and when she looks at him, it is clear that the magic sword definitely did something. Meanwhile, 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 and Oma are still trying to clear a path through the horde of zombies. Thanks to the distraction group, the monsters there have decreased, but there are still many, and 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 has already been using those magic crystals for a long time, so she is almost running out of them. At that moment, Oma is stabbed in the abdomen by one of the monsters, so 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 tries to help him, but ends up surrounded by the monsters. And unfortunately, she will not have time to take a crystal to save herself. Fortunately, at the last second, Ken and the others appeared to save her. They heard about the situation there, so as soon as they finished their mission, they returned as quickly as possible. Eventually, they found the location from where all the monsters are emerging, so 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 uses one of the magic crystals to eliminate all the monsters in the area, allowing them to reach the entrance of the building. 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 gives Oma some of Kurt's healing soup so that he can recover from the wound, and as soon as he returns to a full state, she prepares to enter. More monsters begin to come out of the building, but Ken and the others say they will take care of it. Thus, 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 and Oma can enter without them. Being deep within the ruins, Marus is still being drained of her mana, and at this rate, she will certainly die sooner or later. But the demon does not care about that at all. However, he also does not care about the fact that the humans are managing to resist the monsters, as they are doing much better than he expected. He is especially impressed with 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒆 and Oma, since they have already managed to enter the ruins, so he decides to go deal with them personally. While running through the corridors, 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒆 and Maga eventually find a location from where the zombies are being generated. So she throws one of Kurt's magic crystals, and this completely eliminates the monsters, along with the spell that was being used to summon them. He is honestly surprised that everything went so well, but life is not a bowl of cherries because the demon appears in front of them a few moments later, and now they must face him. Advances and uses one of the magic crystals as a weapon against the demon. But although the power of the crystal indeed strikes him, it has no effect because according to the demon, he has infinite HP. Omar does not believe this, so he tries to cut the demon in the abdomen, but it causes no effect at all. The wound on the demon closes almost instantaneously, but not because he has infinite life. It is because he is using Marus's mana to heal himself, and this is draining a great deal from her. The demon tells Omar and 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 that they are very good compared to most humans he has faced, but in the end, they are no match for him. And the same applies to all their friends fighting outside. Everyone is desperate to protect the city, but eventually they will die at the hands of a legion of zombies. Omar asserts that none of his men will lose to a simple monster, but the demon says he can simply summon more until they are overwhelmed. Even the three who are fighting outside the ruins will stand no chance against the next wave he sends, but 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒆 and Allah refuse to let that happen. The two attack at the same time, and 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒆 cuts off the demon's head while Omar stabs him in the heart, but the demon simply picks his own head back up and continues speaking. He says he will slaughter all the knights and then go after the princess. But just for fun, perhaps he will leave 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒆 and Omar alive so they can watch her die a painful death. 𝐂𝐸zaya does not want to let that happen, but she has no idea what to do in this situation because none of her attacks work, and even Kurt's magic crystals were not enough to kill the demon. Meanwhile, Marus has already accepted her fate because she has lost so much strength that she could not escape even if she could leave that magic circle. Furthermore, because of the curse the bishop placed upon her, she has not eaten for days, so she is hungrier than ever. She would like to taste Kurt's food one last time before dying, and she begins to hallucinate because she could swear she was hearing Kurt's voice now. But it is not a hallucination because Kurt and Lai have just dug a path path to the chamber. Maris is very surprised to see Kurt there, and even more so to realize that he brought the princess along. She thinks Kurt must have discovered that she is involved in the plan to assassinate Lai. So he brought the princess there to witness everything, but Kurt had no idea that Marles was there before arriving. Kurt asks Marisid if she is the person attacking Lai, but Marles explains that she was excommunicated from the church and was deceived in all of this by Bishop Tristan. Kurt and Lee hear what she said, but they are on completely different wavelengths. Lai realizes that Tristan must be responsible for all the assassination attempts against her. Meanwhile, Kurt thinks Maris must be drawing graffiti everywhere because she is frustrated about being excommunicated. Marlo has no idea what Kurt is talking about, and neither does Lee, but she supports everything Kurt says, regardless of whether it makes sense or not. Kurt asks Maris if she knows where Ulicia is, and Maris has no idea who Ulicia is, but she remembers seeing two adventurers on their way there, so they must be on the floor above this one. Kurt thanks her for the information and turns to go look for Ulicia, fully prepared to leave Maris behind because he thinks the magic circle is just graffiti. However, Lai asks him to help clean up the magic circle while she goes to look for Ulicia. Kurt tries to stop her as it would be dangerous for her to go alone, but she reminds him that he gave her a magic sword, so she will be fine on her own. Kurt eventually agrees to let her go, and while Lee is out, he pulls a mop and a bucket from out of nowhere and prepares to start cleaning. Marlo thinks he is crazy because there is no way to destroy a magic circle with ordinary water and a mop, but Kurt is too naive to understand what impossible means. So he simply mops away the magic circle. As soon as the magic circle is broken, the demon realizes that its mana supply has been cut off, so he can no longer afford to take hits and begins to dodge in Omar's attacks. Neither of them understands what is happening, but the fact that the demon is dodging means that he is now afraid of getting hurt. Alicia grabs the last magic crystal in her bag to finally defeat him, but the demon knocks it from her hand before she can use it. And without that crystal, the chances of victory are minimal. The demon is about to start taking the fight seriously, but suddenly Lai appears and calls for Ulicia. Lai has been the demon's target from the beginning, so he stabs her to death instantly and begins to laugh at how foolish she was for coming alone. However, to his surprise, Lee's body transforms into butterflies, and she reveals that she was merely a clone. The demon cannot believe it because he was certain he had stabbed the real one, but that was only an illusion created by the Sword of Confusion. As the name suggests, it creates illusions capable of confusing anyone, whether by showing an incoherent sequence of chaotic images, or in this case, a perfect duplicate of Lee. The demon attempts to kill Lee a few more times, but every time he strikes her, he discovers it was only an illusion. And while the demon was busy with all those illusions, the real Lee managed to reach the magic crystal that Ulicia had dropped, and then she breaks it, and the explosion of energy eliminates the demon. And since the demon was the one who had summoned all the zombies, now that he is gone, all the monsters also disappear. The crisis has finally ended, and everyone in the city can rest easy, knowing they are safe. But Ulicia is angry with Lee for putting herself in danger in that manner. Lee apologizes for coming without permission, but she did not want to continue hiding while others fought for her. Ulicia is still angry, but she has no right to be angry with Lee, because if she had not appeared at that moment, that demon would have killed her and Omar. Omar wants to personally thank Lee for saving him, but she says it is not necessary because he fought even more than she did. She thanks him for all his effort in defending the city and promises to give him a reward for his courageous actions. Meanwhile, Kurt has just finished cleaning the remainder of the magic circle, but even with the circle destroyed, Marlo's curse still prevents her from eating any food. Therefore, sooner or later, she will die of hunger. At that moment, Kurt offers some of his lunch to her as he realizes she is hungry, and Maris appreciates the gesture. But if she eats that, her curse will only cause her to vomit everything. Even so, she decides to eat, so she can taste Kurt's food one last time before dying. However, upon taking a bite, she realizes she can eat normally, and a few moments later, the curse in her stomach is dissipated. Obviously, it was Kurt's food that cured her, but this is the first time Maris truly realizes what Kurt is capable of. She begins to remember all the things Kurt did for her and the rest of the group, and she finally understands that the only reason the dragon's fangs were strong was because they had Kurt's support. So she offers a sincere apology for the way she treated him. Maris did well to recognize Kurt's strength, but that is not enough to prevent her from being arrested, as two of Mimico's agents appear to arrest Maris for her connection to this entire assassination plot. Miles tries to call Kurt to help her, so Kurt promises to visit her in prison whenever she wants. After Marlo is taken to prison, Ulicia approaches Kurt to ask if he is alright. Kurt says he is fine, and that in fact he's more concerned about Ulicia and the others who were fighting. But Lee reassures him, saying that everyone is fine, as they drank some of the medicine Kurt made. As soon as everyone returns from the battlefield, Kurt invites everyone to a banquet at the mansion. But after everyone sits down to eat, all the soldiers fall silent and only stuff their faces with with food. Kurt begins to get worried, thinking they are forcing themselves to eat out of politeness since they do not seem happy. But 𝐂𝐨𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆 says he misunderstood. They are silent because that food is the best thing they have ever tasted, so they are focused on eating as much as possible. Kurt is happy that everyone likes the food. While everyone continues eating, Lee calls 𝐂𝐴 to formally introduce him to Kurt. Kurt recognizes him. He is the person in charge of the construction from the time he repaired the city walls. But Lee informs him that 𝐂𝐴 is also responsible for governing the city and all the people within it. At that moment, several fireworks begin to explode, and everyone is marveled by the spectacle. Kurt explains that he thought it would be nice to have a show along with the food, so he prepared some fireworks in advance. But speaking of the food, 𝐂𝐴 mentions that all of his injuries were suddenly healed after he ate. But Kurt does not understand what the big deal is, as it was always normal to heal after having a good meal back in his village. 10 years ago, when Kurt still lived in his home village, there was a merchant who came to do business there. For various reasons, people generally do not visit 𝐂𝐨𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆. So Kurt rarely had the chance to meet new people, and the merchant happened to have a daughter the same age as him, so he wanted to talk to her. Kurt approaches the girl and tries to initiate a conversation, but she ignores him completely and continues carving her wood. Kurt continues trying and even compliments her beautiful horns, but nothing he does is enough to draw her attention, so Kurt is on the verge of tears. 𝐂𝐨𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆 feels bad now, so she apologizes, telling Kurt that her father ordered her not to speak to any residents of 𝐂𝐨𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆 because according to him, they are a bunch of weirdos. But Kurt does not seem strange to her, so she would love to play with him. Kurt becomes excited to finally have a new friend, and the two get along very well. So they end up taking a golem ride to the forest so that Kurt can show some beautiful flowers to 𝐂𝐨𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆. 𝐂𝐨𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆 is excited, so as soon as she steps off the golem, she runs ahead of Kurt. Then she sees some colorful fruits growing nearby, so she takes a handful and eats them without knowing what they are. A few seconds later, she realizes there was something wrong with the fruits, but it is already too late. The fruits have entered her system and she falls to the ground unconscious. Kurt runs to her to check and immediately recognizes the poisonous fruits that 𝐂𝐨𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆 ate, and it is only a matter of time until she dies because of the poison. Fortunately, Kurt knows how to make the cure, so he takes a nearby flower and begins to prepare the medicine. However, in 𝐂𝐨𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆's current state, there is no way for her to drink it on her own, so Kurt puts the medicine in his own mouth and prepares to feed her himself. Back in the present, 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒆a wakes Kurt up because they are approaching the village that requested help. Basically, the village chief says they are on the verge of dying of thirst because their water reserves have practically run out. He says they will not survive another week like this, but according to the map, the neighboring village should have a large aqueduct on its lands, so she tells the chief to simply ask the other village to share some water with them. However, the chief says he has already tried that, and the chief of that village refused to give any water. That is why he called, hoping that with her connection to the new 𝐂𝐴, she could force the other village to share its water. 𝐂𝐴 does not like the idea of forcing people to do something, but agrees to go to the village to see if she can negotiate a water agreement with them. Then she returns to the others to explain the situation, but everyone except 𝐷𝒂𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆 has already left. 𝐂𝐵𝒆a asks him where the others went, so 𝐷𝒂𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆 explains that they went to the top of that hill to see some birds. If they are having fun, then 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒆a has no intention of boring them with negotiations, so she gets on a horse and heads toward Village B. However, to her shock, when she arrives there, the chief of Village B says the aqueduct is also empty, begging for 𝐿𝐵𝒆a's help because his residents will soon die of thirst at this rate. 𝐿𝐵𝒆a does not know what to do at this point, because if all the water reserves are empty, there's nothing to do but pray for rain. At that moment, some residents arrive running because they have urgent news about the hill. 𝐿𝐵𝒆a knows that is where Kurt and the others went to play, so she runs there to see what is happening. Then she comes face to face with an entire lake there. She is very confused, wanting to know why villages A and B were complaining about a lack of water if there is a huge lake right there. But what Estina tells 𝐿𝐵𝒆a is that the lake was not there a few minutes ago. At that moment, Kurt appears running, and she has lived with him long enough to know that he must have had something to do with it. Kurt was initially there to observe the birds, but then he noticed they seemed thirsty, so he decided to give them water and dug down to an aquifer to create that lake. Leaving that aside for a moment, he wants to know if 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒆a has finished speaking with the village chief. But before she can answer, the chiefs of villages A and B begin to thank 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒆a as they believe it was she who created the lake. 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒆a tries to explain that she did not do it, but the two are too busy being grateful to the village. As thanks, the village chiefs give 𝐂𝐿𝐵𝒆a and the others a basket of eggs to take home, and Kurt was already thinking about all the incredible food he can make for everyone. However, Lee is not at home now because she needs to go with 𝐂𝐴 to give a report about the monster attack to Lord Theon at his palace. After inviting Lee and 𝐂𝐴 to enter, he sits down to have tea with them. Theon has authority equivalent to that of a duke, but it is no secret that most of his power comes from his connections. That is why he is trying so hard to please Lai, because he wants to further strengthen his connection with the royal family. But Lai has already noticed his false kindness. Theon mentions that he heard rumors that during the battle there were special magic crystals powerful enough to eliminate all monsters within a 500 mi radius. And while this is indeed true, Lai tells him that the crystals were not actually that powerful. She is attempting to hide Kurt's ability so that Theon does not get any ideas about using him for his own benefit. She had already made plans to thwart all of Theon's attempts by trying to meet with the Alir Master, but she is caught completely by surprise when Theon says he is thinking about naming the 8th Lear Master as the vice governor of the city. Lai realizes that if Kurt were named vice governor, he would have to make a public appearance. However, at the moment, Kurt does not even know he is the 8th Lee Master, so explaining all of this to him would be difficult. Lai tries to get out of it, saying she cannot make decisions on behalf of the 8th Law Master. Theon calls this a lie because she is literally acting on behalf of the 8th Liar Master, so she should be able to provide an answer. Furthermore, Theon is certain that the Knights would be happy to have the 8th Master as the city's new leader and as the captain of the Knights and interim leader. Theon turns to Marga seeking approval. Lai begins to panic because Omar does not know that Kurt is the 8th Master, and if he approves the new appointment, she will no longer be able to escape this situation. She prays silently for Omar to postpone the decision, but Omar affirms enthusiastically, saying he would be happy to welcome the 8th Liar Master as the new vice governor of the city. Lai desperately tries to back it down, but then Theon asks a question, wanting to know if she thinks the 8th Liar Master is too incompetent to govern the city, and her love for Kurt speaks louder. So she begins to say that the 8th Master is the most competent person on the planet, and that it would be easy for him to govern the city. A few moments later, Lee realizes she has made a mistake because she just agreed to have Kurt become the new vice governor of the city, and she has no idea what to do. Later, she meets with Alicia to explain everything that happened, and fixing this is not going to be easy at all. Alicia asks if they cannot simply find someone to pretend to be the Alir Master, but Lee thinks that would not be possible because no random person would have enough skill to do what Kurt does. And speaking of Kurt, Lai has not seen him all day, so she asks Alicia if she knows where he is. Alicia tells Lee that Kurt is busy raising a child, and Lai begins to panic because she had no idea that Kurt had a son. She also feels disappointed that she is not the mother of Kurt's child, so she immediately begins making plans to adopt the child as her own. However, Alicia says she is misunderstanding the situation. Apparently, one of the eggs they gathered in the village was fertile, so Kurt decided to look after them until they hatched. But knowing Kurt, she says she would not be surprised if he raised a chicken that laid golden eggs. At that moment, Kurt calls out to Alicia's name, saying his egg has just hatched. But when she goes to check, she is shocked to see that Kurt has somehow raised a daughter for himself. Simply put, Kurt was just looking after the egg. But out of nowhere, this little girl came out of it, and she is calling Kurt Papa. So he practically is her father now, and Kurt seems quite happy about this. However, Alicia has a different opinion. She says that humans are not born from eggs, so even if Kurt is willing to accept her as a daughter, he cannot pretend she is a normal person. Most likely, she is some special kind of monster, and the fact that she calls him Papa must only be a trick to make him lower his guard. Kurt understands what Alicia is implying, so he asks if she really thinks his daughter is going to kill him. Does not answer, but tells Kurt to hand over the girl immediately. Kurt asks what she intends to do with her, and Alicia responds directly that she is going to kill the girl for the sake of everyone. Kurt refuses to let that happen, so he promises that he will not let the girl hurt anyone, but Alicia refuses to listen to him and snatches her from his arms. However, before Alicia can do anything, the baby holds her face and calls her Mama. Instantly, Alicia changes her mind, and she begins to imagine a life as a happy family with Kurt. But Lai notices that Alicia is thinking about her man at that moment, so she takes the child to pull her out of that state. Then the girl also calls Lai Mama, and she practically melts with joy at the thought of being a mother along with Kurt. Alicia tries to resist the cuteness, insisting that the girl could be dangerous, but those who stop her say they do not need to make any hasty decisions now. The girl is still young, and if she is raised by careful people like them, there is no way she will become evil. Everyone says they want to welcome the girl, and honestly, after imagining a future with that child, Alicia can no longer force herself to kill her, so she agrees to let her stay. Now that everyone has decided to keep the girl, Lai says they should choose a name for her, so everyone sits down to think of one. Kurt thinks they should call her 𝐂𝐨𝒄𝒊𝒆 because in the language of the Lipi civilization, it is a name that symbolizes the connection between points. Both Olia and Lai seem to like the name, and the girl does too, so from now on she will be called 𝐂𝐴𝒄𝒄𝒊𝒆. Later that night, Alicia is sleeping on the sofa with 𝐂𝐴𝒄𝒄𝒊𝒆 on top of her. But although she agreed to keep her, it does not mean she is no longer suspicious about the child's origin. One of Mimiko's agents approaches her, and Alicia hands over an envelope containing samples of Auror's hair and saliva. And as soon as Mimiko receives the samples, she will be able to analyze them to discover what 𝐂𝐴𝒄𝒄𝒊𝒆 truly is. The next next morning, Kurt and Ulisha show Ore the toy room that Kurt made for her. But in reality, this was made to be a prison to keep her there until Mimiko finishes conducting the tests. It has no windows, and the walls are reinforced with mithril, so there is no way for her to escape the room on her own. Ulisha feels bad for asking Kurt to do this, as it seems a bit cruel to isolate a child from the world. But this is only a temporary measure until they are certain that Akir is not a threat. For now, they plan to let Estina play with her while she and Kurt finish one more mission. But as soon as Ar hears that Kurt and Ulisha are leaving, she stops playing and says she wants to go with them. Kurt tells Ar that she cannot go because they are going on a mission, but he promises that as soon as he finishes, he will return to play with her, and Akir seems to accept this. While Kurt and Ulisha are traveling by carriage to the village that requested help, notices that Kurt is upset about leaving Akur behind, so she says they should focus on completing the mission as quickly as possible so they can see Or again. But at that moment, they hear a voice coming from inside the carriage. Kurt and Ulisha stop to see what it is, and to their surprise, it is accurate. Neither of them has any idea how she managed to escape the room, because a child-proof prison made by Kurt should be impenetrable, but Kurt simply assumes he must have made some mistake. At that moment, Ulisha notices one of Mimiko's agents nearby in disguise, so she invents an excuse to go speak with him, leaving Kurt and Aor alone. While she is away, Kurt remembers what Ulisha said about Akir possibly being a dangerous monster. He thinks he's being selfish for wanting to keep her because if Akir really ends up attacking people, he would be unable to stop her. Ulisha returns shortly after and notices what Kurt is thinking, but she reassures him, saying that he did nothing wrong. There is still a possibility that Akir might become a threat in the future, but for now, she is harmless. So it is their duty as parents to ensure they raise her well, so that she grows up to be a good girl. At that moment, a man suddenly appears, saying he was waiting for them because he needs the two of them to defeat the Demon King and save the world. Kurt and Akir decide to play along, promising to defeat the Demon King, but Ulisha says they did not sign up to fight any demons today. At that moment, a woman approaches apologizing for her father's behavior. She says that the man is her father and that he is a bit old, saying strange things. She was the one who made the request, but she is surprised to see that a newly formed couple appeared to assist her. Kurt and Ulisha become embarrassed, as with Aur there, they truly look like a happy family, and it does not help that Auri calls them Papa and Mama. Kurt does not mind the misunderstanding that much, but Ulisha is paralyzed since the client mistook her for Kurt's wife. Kurt thinks Ulisha might be upset with the idea of marrying him, but clarifying the misunderstanding would take too much time. So Kurt decides to do his best to finish the job quickly so that he and Ulisha can leave. He asks the client to say what the problem is. So she explains that her pigs have not been eating lately and she does not know what to do. The weather has been quite hot in recent days. So Kurt assumes the pigs are suffering from heat exhaustion, which leaves them too tired to eat. Kurt says he can prepare a food that will cure the pigs' exhaustion, and the client is very grateful. She leaves so that Kurt can work, but then he notices that Ulisha has still not moved from that spot. He wonders if she is still upset about the misunderstanding from earlier, but in reality, her brain is just freezing from the happiness of having been called Kurt's wife. Of course, Kurt has no idea that she is happy about this, so he decides to give Yulia some time and begins to prepare the feed for the pigs. It takes only a few minutes to be ready, and when the pigs start eating, Brain finally finishes processing her emotions. She begins to think that if the client mistook her for Kurt's wife, it must mean they are a good match, and perhaps she really could marry Kurt one day. However, she interrupts her own thought because she's going too far with this fantasy. She tries to convince herself that she does not want a relationship with Kurt, but every time she looks at him, her heart starts to ache. So perhaps she's in love. At that moment, a dragon flies over them and notices it is heading straight for Kurt and Akir, so she runs to try to save them. However, Kurt tells Ulisha to put her sword away because the dragon is not a threat. Alicia listens to Kurt and stops in her tracks. But when she sees the dragon approaching Akir, she thinks it is going to eat her. However, the dragon only wanted to eat some of the feed that Kurt prepared. Ulisha is very confused now, but Kurt says this is perfectly normal as in his village. Dragons appeared all the time to eat, says this is not normal at all, but there is no point in saying that every time Kurt does something absurd. In any case, Ulisha suddenly smells blood nearby. So she goes to investigate, and the scent leads her to a nearby vineyard. There, she finds one of Mimiko's agents gravely wounded on the ground, and since this agent was responsible for watching over Kurt at all times, wonders who could have done this to him. She goes to investigate and sees someone hidden among the vines, so she draws her sword and attacks. Kurt hears a commotion and goes there to see what is happening, and to his surprise, a woman appears and demands that he hand over the child, stands in front of Kurt to protect him, and Kurt thinks the woman must be a dragon hunter after the dragon that appeared, but Ulisha thinks it is something more serious. For now, she tells Kurt to get out of there for his own safety, but before Kurt can even respond, the dragon grabs Akur and flies away. Now Ulisha is ready to fight with all her strength against the hunter, but unfortunately she is being completely dominated. side. The hunter knocks her to the ground and is about to finish Alicia off, but at the last second, she manages to defend herself with her hoe and retreats. Alicia asks what the hunter wants, but the hunter sees no reason to explain her objective, as it would be for someone who will soon be dead. She then advances, and despite 𝑒𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆's best attempt to block the attack, she still finds herself cut in the stomach. Alicia falls to the ground, and the hunter approaches slowly to deliver the final blow. But before she can attack, Alicia throws one of Kurt's magic crystals at the hunter, resulting in a huge explosion. Alicia assumes the explosion would be enough to defeat her, but to her surprise, the hunter is perfectly fine and has just sprouted demonic horns, blurred with fear because it has been more than a century since a true demon voluntarily revealed itself. She does not understand why one would appear now. The demonist is quite surprised as 𝑒𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 caused enough damage to dissipate her human transformation, but that was expected of people who defeated the lesser demon lord. Upon hearing this, 𝑒𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 realizes she had been watching them since the attacks of the lesser demons, so the child she was trying to kidnap might be related to Kurt. Fortunately, Kurt is already at a safe distance, but 𝑒𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 has no hope of defeating the demon because she has already used all her weapons. The best she can do now is sacrifice herself to gain more time for Kurt to escape, but a few moments later, she sees Kurt flying straight toward her on the dragon's back. She cannot believe Kurt would do something so stupid, because even if the dragon has good combat skills, Kurt is absolutely useless in a fight, and it does not help that he accidentally throws himself into a tree. 𝑒𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 runs to Kurt, shouting at him for returning, since he has no chance of defeating the demon, but Kurt is well aware of his weakness. He knows the best choice would be to flee, but he refuses to abandon a friend, and that is why he left 𝒂𝒄𝒄 in a safe place and returned to save 𝑒𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆. At that moment, a group of pigs appears running toward them, and this is part of Kurt's plan. So, when the herd reaches them, Kurt grabs 𝑒𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 and jumps onto the back of one of the pigs. Alicia asks if this is something he used to do in his hometown, but in fact, it is the first time Kurt has done something like this. He knew it was a reckless idea, but he is willing to risk his safety if this means protecting someone precious to him. However, before they could escape, the demon launches a massive fireball at them, decimating the running pigs. Kurt and 𝑒𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 are thrown to the ground, and the demon approaches them. 𝑒𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 needs to do something. She asks Kurt to lend her his dagger. Kurt is worried that she might get hurt, but 𝑒𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒊𝒆 reassures him that she's not trying to sacrifice herself again. She promises to do her best to survive. Thus, when the demon launches another fireball at her, she raises the dagger to defend herself. The only way to survive is to use a secret spell cutting technique, a technique that allows one to destroy a spell by cutting through its magic. However, although 𝑒𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒆 has tried many times, she has never managed to execute it successfully before, and luck is not on her side today because she fails once again to destroy the spell. It seems this is the end for 𝑒𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒆, but at the last second, 𝒂𝒄𝒄 appears out of nowhere and embraces her. The fireball suddenly disperses, but not because of anything 𝑒𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒆 did. Instead, the demon dissipated the spell on her own because she did not want to hurt 𝒂𝒄𝒄. 𝑒𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒆 realizes that the demon must be after 𝒂𝒄𝒄 and must care a great deal about her to go to such lengths to reach her. 𝒂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒆 tries to ask the demon some questions, but before she could say anything, the demon's injuries begin to take their toll, so she flees. A few moments later, 𝒂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒆 faints from her own wounds. Therefore, Kurt runs to her and prepares to give her some medicine. Ouch. Fortunately, 𝒂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒆's injuries were not fatal, so she will survive, and 𝒂𝒄𝒄 strokes her face to cheer her up, appreciates the gesture, but then remembers that 𝒂𝒄𝒄 should not have been there in the first place. So she panics and asks how she arrived there. Kurt says he's certain he left Aura in a safe place, but 𝒂𝒄𝒄 simply appeared out of nowhere next to 𝒂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒆 when she was about to be hit. This looks very much like teleportation, and even though it is not something rare, it always requires the use of a teleportation magic stone. So if 𝒂𝒄𝒄 is capable of teleporting without a stone, this could be a very significant development. 𝒂𝒐a asks 𝒂𝒂 to show again how she arrived there, or tries, but for some reason it does not work, so she ends up giving up and says she cannot do it. 𝒂𝒐a asks why, since Aura managed to teleport a long distance before. But before Aura could answer, one of the pigs appears, and Kurt and 𝒂𝒐 suddenly remember that all of the client's pigs were burned during Kurt's rescue mission, and she definitely will not be happy if she sees this. So Kurt says he will heal them immediately and put them back in the pens. When the client returns, she becomes satisfied upon seeing that all of her pigs appear happier than ever before. She wishes to express her deepest gratitude for the assistance she received. But then she notices that Kurt is not there. Therefore, she asks 𝒂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒆 where her husband has gone. Panics slightly at being called Kurt's wife once again, but she regains her composure and informs the client that Kurt went to visit one of the neighboring farms. Currently, Kurt is riding the dragon on his way to that farm, and along the path, the dragon notices something on the ground, so they make a small detour. Meanwhile, 𝒂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒆 and 𝒂𝒄𝒄 begin to return home in their carriage. 𝒂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒆 is happy that 𝒂𝒄𝒄 is safe, but she still wonders why the demon from before cancelled the spell before it struck. 𝒂𝐿𝐵𝒄𝒆 Ulisha remembers the demon panicking when she saw 𝒂𝐨𝒄𝒊𝒆, so she might have cancelled the spell to avoid hitting her. But Ulisha will need more information before drawing any conclusions. She also needs to worry about the possibility that 𝒂𝐄𝒄 might be able to use that teleportation magic at will, but that is already a problem for another day. So she decides to just appreciate the fact that she is still alive for the time being. A few moments later, Ulisha hears Kurt calling for her, so she stops the carriage and waits for him to land. She wonders why Kurt did not go straight home. Then she sees the unconscious demon on the back of the dragon and becomes filled with questions. Kurt explains that while he was riding the dragon, he saw something, so they went down into the forest to investigate. And after searching for a while, Kurt found the demon woman unconscious on the ground because of the wounds that Ulia had caused. At first, Kurt did not know what to do because he wanted to treat her injuries so that she would survive, but at the same time, the demon could still be dangerous. Eventually, he decided to save her life, so he lights a small campfire to begin preparing a medicine. The demon regains consciousness at a certain point, but she still cannot move. So she asks Kurt what he's doing. Kurt explains that he is preparing a medicine for her, but she calls him a fool for showing mercy to an enemy. However, Kurt knows that she could have killed Yulia and 𝒂𝐄𝒄 if the spell had hit, but she chose to spare their lives, and that is already enough reason for him to save her. Kurt finishes preparing the medicine and throws it to her. At first, she refuses to take it, but Kurt reminds her that she will die if she continues like that, so she ends up taking the vial, turns her back, and drinks the medicine. However, as soon as the liquid goes down her throat, she realizes that something is wrong. Her wounds are healing, but now she can no longer move, and this happens because Kurt mixed the paralyzing agent into the medicine. He might even want to save her, but he is not naive enough to believe that the enemy will not attack him. This was an excellent foresight on Kurt's part, but he still believes that the demon is merely a dragon hunter, so his perception of the situation unfortunately has not improved. He wishes they could get along, just as happened with 𝒏𝒄𝒊𝒆 when he was a child, and as soon as she hears the name of 𝒏𝒊𝒆, she begins to reach her hand out toward Kurt, but the effect of the medicine ends up causing her to faint. This brings us back to the present, but Ulisha wonders what kind of medicine Kurt prepared. Since demons are supposed to be immune to all poisons, they finally return to the mansion. Ulisha cannot believe that she is about to carry an unconscious demon inside the house. Meanwhile, Kurt tells 𝒂𝐄𝒄 that she needs to apologize to Sheena because she was likely very worried about her sudden disappearance. As soon as Sheena and Lee realize that 𝒂𝐄𝒄 has returned, they run outside and embrace her because they thought that something bad had happened to her. A few moments later, a man also comes out of the mansion, but Ulisha has never seen him before, so Lee introduces him as a new 8th leader. The man introduces himself as 𝒂𝒂𝒄𝒊𝒆, and Kurt immediately believes that Lee is the new master of the 8, so Lee approaches to introduce herself. However, Lee realizes that something is wrong because Kurt is the true master of the 8, so this guy must be an imposter. She asks Kurt to go inside and start preparing dinner while she takes care of all the luggage. And as soon as Kurt leaves, she tries to talk to 𝒂𝒂𝒄𝒊𝒆, but he suddenly pushes her against the carriage. She has no idea who he is, but it is clear that he has crossed the line, so instinctively she delivers a powerful kick toward his abdomen. However, her leg passes right through 𝒂𝒂𝒄𝒊𝒆's body. Alicia then sees Lee smiling behind him and finally understands everything. 𝒂𝒂𝒄𝒊𝒆 is an illusion that Lee created using the sword that Kurt made, but Ulisha had no idea that the sword could create illusions of people who do not even exist.